The sun rose gently over Lagos, casting a golden light across the iconic All Saints Cathedral. Outside its gleaming marble walls, the city buzzed with whispers and wonder. Today was the wedding of the year, the union of beauty, wealth, and a love story that had waited 15 long years to be written. Adana Okoye, daughter of oil magnate Chief Sebastian Okoye, was no stranger to the spotlight. Known for her grace and generosity, she carried the kind of charm that made even the bitterest cynic smile. And today, she would marry her childhood sweetheart, Obinna Obi Naji, who had seemingly returned from the shadows of the past. Finding his way back to her after vanishing for more than a decade, the cathedral gleamed with gold and white. Luxury cars lined the entrance. Guests in designer fabrics took their seats. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. At the altar stood Reverend Emmanuel Adebayo, a man of quiet wisdom, whose hands had joined the hands of Lagos's most elite. He had seen love bloom, falter, and sometimes deceive. But this ceremony, something about it stirred him in a way he couldn't explain. He glanced at the groom, charming, composed but strangely unsettled, a man who smiled too much but whose eyes never smiled with him. As the final hymn began and the church doors prepared to open for the bride's grand entrance, Reverend Emmanuel whispered a prayer only he could hear. Lord, if there is truth hidden beneath beauty today, let it rise. Because even the most perfect illusion eventually breaks. The cathedral was a masterpiece. Towering white columns, sunlight pouring through stained glass, and golden ribbons fluttering like whispers from heaven. Cameramen from lifestyle channels jostled gently for the perfect shot. Outside, rows of black SUVs and champagne-colored Bentleys shimmered under the morning sun. If heaven ever hosted a wedding, it might look like this. Adana Okoye's wedding wasn't just an event. It was a symbol. The daughter of a billionaire oil tycoon marrying her long-lost childhood love. It was a story Lagos couldn't stop telling. The guest list read like a national roll call. Senators, royalty, Nollywood stars, CEOs, everyone who mattered was here. Inside the cathedral, the air felt sacred and surreal. Every bench was filled, every face expectant, and at the center of it, all stood Obinna Obi Naji. Dressed in a perfectly tailored white tuxedo with gold accents, he looked like a prince stepping out of a dream. His jawline sharp, smile dazzling, posture poised. He turned heads effortlessly, and yet something felt off. Reverend Emmanuel Adebayo stood at the altar, a man seasoned by decades of guiding souls through love, loss, and divine covenant. He had officiated state weddings, secret elopements, and reconciliations. But this one— His eyes rested on the groom again. Obi's fingers tapped softly against his thigh. His left hand kept adjusting his cuff. He smiled at guests, but never truly looked at them. Most wouldn't notice. But Emmanuel had learned to listen not just with ears, but with spirit. He closed his Bible briefly and whispered a silent prayer. Lord, if anything hides behind this joy, show me. The choir began to hum a slow, heavenly tune. A moment later the cathedral doors swung open, and there she was, Adana, radiant, unshakable, regal. The room stood still as she walked down the aisle, escorted by her father, cloaked in white satin and crystal lace. Her veil shimmered like mist kissed by morning light. Every guest smiled. Many wiped away tears. Cameras flashed. Hearts fluttered. But Reverend Emmanuel saw only one thing— Obi. His smile tightened, his jaw clenched, and for a fleeting second he looked at the nearest exit, not at his bride and not at God. 15 years ago, before diamonds and designer gowns, before she was Adana Okoye, heir to an oil empire, she was just a barefoot girl chasing kites through the dusty gardens of Umunza. And Obi had been there. He wasn't wealthy, but he was clever, mischievous, brave, the kind of boy who dared to climb the church bell tower just to see if angels lived inside. They had met under a mango tree. She was hiding from her. Nanny, he was stealing mangoes. A perfect beginning. They were inseparable after that. They shared secrets, climbed trees, chased goats, and swore eternal friendship. "One day I'll marry you," he had said with all the confidence of a 10-year-old boy. "Only if you stop eating mangoes with dirt on your hands," she'd teased. But one day, he vanished. His family moved to the U.S. overnight, her father explained. A business opportunity for his parents. These things happen. There were no goodbyes, no letters, no phone calls, only silence. Adana waited for months, then years. Eventually, she buried him, in memory, not in malice. She moved on. She became a woman, traveled, studied abroad, inherited board seats. Suitors came with yachts and titles, but none made her laugh the way Obi did. None made her feel known. Until one rainy night, her phone buzzed. A DM. "Queen A? Is it really you? I've been searching for you for years. It's me, Obi." She froze. At first, she assumed it was a scam. But as the messages came, each laced with childhood nicknames, inside jokes, secret memories, her defenses softened. He remembered the day she broke her sandal running from a goat. He remembered the little song they made up to scare mosquitoes. Details no stranger could fake. They talked every night after that. He told her his life had been hard. Foster homes, lost documents, a broken trail. But now, finally, fate had brought them back together. 2 weeks later, he flew to Lagos, and when she saw him at the airport, taller, stronger, familiar, and yet different, her heart didn't doubt, it remembered. The reunion between Adana and Obi was the kind of romantic spark people wrote novels about. From the moment they embraced at the airport, it was as if no time had passed. She laughed like she hadn't in years. He looked at her like no one else existed. Within weeks, he had been folded into her world. He charmed her friends with old stories. He bonded with her staff. He joined her charity events, even gave a short speech that had half the room in tears. It all felt effortless, too effortless. They began planning the wedding barely 3 months after he arrived. Some whispered that it was fast, but Adana dismissed it. "When you've waited this long," she said, "why hesitate?" But not. Everyone was convinced. Chief Sebastian Okoye watched quietly. He didn't interfere, but he didn't smile either. A man who had built an empire by trusting instinct more than words, he knew when something didn't sit right. He asked Obi questions in private. Where had he been living? What did he do for work? Why were there no social records of him before? Last year? Obi always had answers, polite, humble, vague. "I moved around a lot, sir. I worked under the table. Immigrant life, you know. I lost many contacts. I'm just happy to be found again." Sebastian said nothing, but he called in a favor. 2 weeks later, a discreet report landed on his desk. It wasn't alarming, but it was thin. A few university references, no digital trail before a year ago, a newly created Instagram account. Nothing illegal, just oddly clean. Sebastian tucked the file away. Let her choose, he told himself. But even Adana, in the quiet moments between laughter and dreams, noticed things. Like how Obi once said they used to sneak puff-puff from Mama, Uju's roadside stall, but it was Zobo and Chin Chin she had sold, or the way he mixed up her cousin's name with a girl who had only joined their school years later. Small mistakes. His memory must be fuzzy, she told herself. He's been through a lot, trauma, time, change. Still, the cracks multiplied at a dinner party. One of her friends asked Obi what song he had once serenaded Adana with under the mango tree. He smiled. "Wasn't it African Giant by Burna Boy?" The room chuckled politely, but Adana froze. It had been African Queen, Two-Face, a song he'd sung off-key with a stick as a fake microphone when they were 10. She brushed it off again. Love forgets, she thought, but truth doesn't. By the 4th premarital counseling session, Reverend Emmanuel Adebayo had stopped taking notes for the record. He had started writing in a separate notebook, a private one, a notebook he only opened when his spirit refused to rest. Obi and Adana came to the sessions together, always holding hands, always smiling. But it was Obi's eyes that troubled Emmanuel. They darted too quickly, softened too deliberately. His words were smooth, practiced, too perfect. "Tell me," Emmanuel asked one day, "what do you remember most fondly about childhood in Enugu?" Obi leaned back, smiled, and said, "The Yam Festival in February. I used to dance near the masquerades. We'd run around the shrine and eat roasted corn." Adana smiled, nostalgic, but Emmanuel did not. He knew the Yam Festival in Enugu was celebrated in August, not February. It was a sacred cultural fixture, and there had never been a shrine near their primary school, only a dried-up well that had long since collapsed. He said nothing, just circled the date in his notebook. In another session, they spoke of family. Obi grew suddenly quiet. "I lost everyone," he said. "My parents died. I was alone. I don't like to talk about it." Adana squeezed his hand. Emmanuel nodded, his voice gentle. Grief hides in different corners, but something in Obi's grief felt too still, as if it wasn't grief at all, but a script. Later that week, the church secretary knocked on Emmanuel's door. "There's someone you should know about," she said. "A woman came by early this morning." "Did she say why?" She pointed at the wedding poster, at Obi's face, and she said, "That's not his name." Then she walked away. Emmanuel went straight to the security room and requested the footage. The woman stood still in front of the banner, her mustard-colored head wrap unmistakable. Her eyes behind dark glasses were unreadable, but her body was rigid. She clenched her fists, then slowly walked off. Recognition. Not shock, not heartbreak. Recognition. The whisper in Emmanuel's spirit became a murmur. He met with Chief Sebastian that same evening. "I don't want to create scandal," Emmanuel said, "but I do believe something is not right." Sebastian sighed, then handed him a file. "I ran my own checks. They came up thin. I don't want to break my daughter's heart, but I've arranged for private security. Quiet, just in case." Emmanuel nodded slowly. "I believe God will reveal what needs revealing." That night Emmanuel walked the length of the cathedral alone, blessing every aisle with oil. As his fingers touched the polished wooden benches, he whispered a prayer, not for beauty, not for celebration, but for truth. And in the stillness of that sacred place, he heard the same whisper again, "Be ready." The afternoon before the wedding, the cathedral grounds buzzed with rehearsals, flower deliveries, and soft chatter from planners double-checking every detail. Inside his modest office behind the altar, Reverend Emmanuel sat alone, reviewing the ceremony script one last time. Then came a knock, not hurried, not tentative. Just steady. "Come in," he said. An elderly man stepped in slowly. He wore a plain, brown caftan, his gait slightly uneven, his eyes sharp despite the wrinkles around them. He removed his cap politely and stood before the desk without speaking. "You're welcome," Emmanuel offered gently. "Please, have a seat." "My name is Nemeka Naji," the man said at last. "I am, or was, the uncle of Obinna Naji." The room felt suddenly colder. Emmanuel sat up straighter. "You're Obi's uncle?" "I helped raise him after his father died. I knew him better than anyone." Emmanuel nodded. "So, what brings you here, Baba Naimeka?" The old man reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a faded photograph. A Kuit, younger version of Obi, smiling beside a woman and child. "That man standing at the altar tomorrow," he said, pointing toward the cathedral, "is not my nephew." Emmanuel said nothing. "I saw the wedding banner last week at the marketplace. I stared at that face for 5 minutes. It looked like him, close enough to fool strangers, but not close enough to fool me." "People change with age," Emmanuel said gently. giving space for clarity. "But blood doesn't," Nemeka replied. "Obinna had a mark, a birthmark shaped like a star behind his right ear. We used to call it the seal of God. It was impossible to miss. That boy wore it, like a badge his whole life." The silence between them thickened. "If that man has no mark," Nemeka said slowly, "then he is wearing my nephew's face without his name." Emmanuel rose and walked toward the window. Outside, a young girl practiced her flower petal. Walk along the church path. A violinist tuned strings softly in the corner. Beauty bloomed everywhere, but inside, something was rotting. "Have you told the family?" Emmanuel asked. "I tried. The security men wouldn't let me through. They assumed I was a nuisance." Emmanuel turned back, eyes now locked with the elders. "Why tell me?" "Because you're the only one with the authority to stop it, if it must be stopped." Emmanuel reached for his Bible. "I will not cause chaos," he said carefully, "but I will be watchful, and if God chooses to uncover something, I will not look away." Nemeka stood. "I've done my part. The rest is in your hands." As he left, his figure framed briefly in the doorway, Emmanuel whispered, "Or in God's." That night, as candles lit the cathedral in soft halos, Emmanuel added a single line to his private notebook. Mark behind the ear. Watch. Confirm. Be ready. The cathedral shimmered with elegance. Golden chandeliers glowed above a sea of silks and sequins. The scent of roses hung thick in the air. And at the altar, with every guest breathlessly watching, Adana and the man they believed to be Obinna Naji stood hand in hand. The choir finished its hymn. Reverend Emmanuel looked out over the congregation, hundreds of witnesses, every seat filled, every heart focused on the moment. He turned toward the couple. His voice rang out, firm and unwavering. "If anyone here knows of any lawful reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." Silence. Then a chair scraped sharply across the marble floor. Heads turned. From the third row a woman stood, dressed in mustard yellow, her sunglasses now off, her face tight with restrained fury. "I object," she said. A collective gasp rippled through the church like a storm through glass. Adana's hand trembled. The groom's shoulders stiffened. The woman stepped forward. "That man is not who you think he is. His name isn't Obinna Naji." Another gasp. A few guests whispered her words aloud, as if repeating them would make sense of the moment. Reverend Emmanuel raised a hand. "Ma'am, on what grounds do you speak? I knew him as Chijoke Ume. He lived with me for 2 years in Asaba before vanishing. He lied to me. He lied to everyone." The groom forced a dry laugh. "I don't know who she is. This is insane." "She knows your secrets," Adana whispered, pulling slightly away. "Adana, please." Emmanuel stepped between them. His voice softened, but carried the full weight of truth. "Then let us resolve it now. In peace." He turned to the groom. "Obi, your uncle came to me yesterday. He spoke of a birthmark, a star-shaped mark behind your right ear. If you are truly who you claim to be, show it to us now." The groom's eyes widened, his mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Son," Emmanuel repeated gently, "if there is truth in you, it will not fear the light." A hush fell over the crowd, the kind of silence that waits for something to fall. Glass, pride, or lies. The groom raised a shaking hand to his ear. Slowly he pulled it forward. Nothing. No mark, no scar, just smooth skin. The silence became something else entirely. A verdict. Adana's face broke, not with tears, but with recognition. "You're not him," she whispered. The man didn't deny it. Not yet, but the truth had begun to speak on its own. The cathedral, once filled with music and light, now sat frozen in silence, all eyes locked on the man at the altar. His hand slowly dropped from his ear, and whatever was left of his performance crumbled with it. No more smiles. No more excuses. Only truth. Reverend Emmanuel stepped forward. "Son," he said, voice calm but heavy, "tell us your name." The man swallowed hard. His voice cracked as he replied, "My name is Chijioke Ume." A soft cry escaped from somewhere in the back. "Rao." Adana stood completely still, her hand trembling at her side. Chijioke kept going. "I met Obina Naji at university in London. We were roommates. He was brilliant, kind, full of dreams. He used to talk about Adana all the time, showed me pictures, told me stories. She was his home, even when we were half a world away." He looked down at the marble floor. "One night, he died. Gas explosion. Gone instantly. No family to claim him. No records clean enough to trace. I was the only one who knew him." He paused. The weight of what came next pulled at his shoulders. "I was drowning in debt. No visa, no future. I found his student documents, his photos. I remembered everything he ever told me. He looked at Adana now, directly but without defiance. So I became him." A collective gasp rolled through the church. At first I told myself it was to honor him. Then I saw her profile, saw the life she lived. I reached out, thinking, maybe I could live the life he never got. Maybe I could give her the love he never could. Adana's voice broke the silence. "You gave me lies." "I gave you everything I could," Chijioke said, a tear running down his face. "I tried to become the man you remembered." "But you weren't him." "No," he whispered. "But I wanted to be. I wanted to believe love could make the lie feel true." Emmanuel's voice rose, not in anger, but in righteous sorrow. "You used a dead man's name to deceive a living woman. That is not love. That is theft." Chijioke dropped to his knees. "I'm sorry," he said, louder now. "To her, to Obina's memory, to all of you. I was desperate, I was empty, and I filled myself with someone else's story." The silence that followed was not forgiving, it was final. At the edge of the aisle, two men in black suits stepped forward quietly. Security, already briefed, already prepared. Chijioke didn't resist. As he was escorted away, he looked back last time at Adana. But she didn't look at him, because she wasn't looking for closure. She was looking for herself. By sundown, All Saints Cathedral was empty. The gold-trimmed chairs, the rose-lined altar, the expensive camera rigs, all left behind in eerie silence. But outside, the world was anything but quiet. Headlines spread like wildfire. Heiress bride exposes. Groom as imposter at the altar. From love story to scandal, the wedding that never was. Who is Chijioke Ume? Talk shows dissected every second of the viral clip. Twitter boiled over. Some mocked, some sympathized, others turned Chijioke into a tragic meme. The man who loved too much. But no one was laughing in the Okoye household. Adana locked herself in her room. The wedding dress hung untouched. The makeup tray remained open. Her phone buzzed endlessly, but she didn't answer. Chief Sebastian Okoye stood outside her door. In silence, his wife asked gently, "Should we bring her food?" "She doesn't need food," he replied. "She needs to remember who she is." It wasn't until the third day that she stepped out. No makeup, no designer shoes, just her bare face and quiet strength. "I want to speak to Reverend Emmanuel," she said. When he arrived, she didn't cry. She asked one question. "Did you know?" "I suspected," he admitted. "But suspicion is not evidence." "Then why didn't you stop it?" "Because truth doesn't obey panic. It reveals itself when it must. And I chose to be ready instead of reckless." She nodded slowly. Chief Okoye entered the room, placing a file on the table. "This is the report I ordered 2 weeks after he arrived. Incomplete records. Holes in his identity. I couldn't stop you from loving him." but I made sure we'd be safe when it all fell apart. Adana opened the file. Quiet. Thoughtful. You both knew, she whispered. And you waited. We didn't wait, her father replied. We watched. And we protected. For the first time since the altar, Adana let out a deep, shaky breath. I feel stupid, she said. You feel human, Emmanuel corrected. The following week, Chijioke was officially charged with identity, fraud, falsification of documents, and attempted marriage under false pretense. His trial was scheduled. Adana refused every interview request. No magazine, no camera, no statement. Let the world talk. She had nothing to prove, but she had something to rebuild, not her reputation, her peace. 3 months after the wedding that never was, Adana Okoye stood on a small stage, not at a gala, not at a luxury resort, but in a modest hall in Surulere surrounded by folding chairs and flickering ceiling fans. She wasn't wearing silk or heels, just jeans, a plain blouse, and a microphone. My name is Adana, she said, her voice steady. And yes, I was deceived, but more importantly, I survived. The women in the room leaned in. Many had been victims of romance scams, emotional manipulation, or betrayal. Some had lost money. Others had lost years. All of them carried invisible scars. Adana didn't come to inspire. She came to build. That day marked the official launch of the Truth Circle, a nonprofit organization aimed at educating women on emotional fraud, identity red flags, and how to protect not just their money, but their minds. The foundation offered digital literacy workshops, trauma counseling, and legal assistance. She never mentioned Chijioke's name. He wasn't the story. She was, and the women she stood beside. As weeks passed, she appeared at universities, women's, shelters, and conferences. Always soft-spoken, never dramatic, but unshakably clear. The most dangerous lies, she once said, are the ones we tell ourselves to protect the ones we love. The world began to listen again, not to gossip, to her. One afternoon, while delivering educational kits to a pediatric hospital, she bent down to adjust a box and almost dropped it. Let me help you, a voice said gently. She turned, a young man in hospital scrubs, holding the box with ease. Thank you, she said. I'm Daniel, he smiled. Volunteer duty? You're donating books? Yes, she replied. Adana. There was no flicker of recognition in his eyes, no awkward silence, no viral headlines hidden behind his gaze. Just kindness. They spoke for a few minutes about the children, the faulty air conditioning, and why hospitals never had enough pens. When she left, he said, Maybe I'll see you around. Maybe? She smiled. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't fate. It was peaceful. That evening, she visited Reverend Emmanuel. I met someone, she said casually. Famous? No, just real. He smiled, sipped his tea, and said, Good. Let truth find you this time, not the other way around. She nodded, eyes distant. She didn't need another wedding. Not yet. What she needed, and what she was finally choosing, was herself. The bells of All Saints Cathedral rang again. This time, not for a wedding, not for heartbreak, but simply because it was Sunday. Inside, Reverend Emmanuel stood behind the pulpit, his Bible open, his voice calm and clear. Love, he said, is not defined by how grand the entrance is, nor by the weight of the gown or the gold on the ring. It is defined by truth, and truth does not tremble. The congregation listened more closely now. Since that unforgettable wedding, the church had become more than a holy place. It had become a symbol, a reminder that discernment is not suspicion, and silence is not peace. Reverend Emmanuel continued, When something doesn't feel right, it's not fear. It's often your spirit asking you to listen. And in the last row, quietly seated among the others, was Adana. She didn't need the front pew anymore. She didn't need to be seen. She had become something greater than the story told about her, not a broken bride, not a headline, but a woman who stood through the fire and walked out whole. Across the aisle, Daniel sat quietly, not holding her hand, not needing to. They were still strangers, still forming, but for the first time in a long time, Adana wasn't waiting for a prince. She was walking her path, with open eyes and a steady heart, because real love doesn't arrive in disguise. It doesn't rush in like a fairy tale. It reveals itself in truth. And this time, she would know it when it came.